Hello, my name is Ben here from the Beniverse, and today we are starting our new series on the TV show Halo, premiering on Paramount Plus. And here with me for the next 9 weeks is my friend from college and high school, actually. We've known each other quite a long time, Mr. Ryan Hines.
Hey, nice to be here.
Hey, and the reason I asked you of all my friends to be on here is because I think you're the only one that I know who is pretty active in the Halo world and is still like actively like following it.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
And so I wanted that perspective on the show because I'm someone who's barely played any of the games. I got the Master Chief Collection on my computer. I've dabbled in it a little bit. I played here and there throughout the past decade, but I've never actually played it hardcore. So I am watching this show strictly as just a viewer, where Ryan is going to be looking at it much more as a fan. And we are breaking down episode 1, which does it even have? Yes, it has a title. Contact is the name of this episode. And let's just dive into it, because I have some thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts, and I'm going to just kind of let you go in. I feel like your thoughts are going to be much more interesting than mine. So I'm going to start with this question. Is this episode, the premiere of Halo, good?
Okay, so from what I've been hearing about this show, and obviously the lengthy production that it's had since literally 2013, a part of me wanted this to be absolutely incredible and really good, but then also a part of me was like, with the amount of production hell that has been through, like, don't get your hopes up. And honestly, as a first episode, it was pretty good overall. Like, I came out of it thinking to myself, like, I didn't hate that as much as I thought I would. I mean, apart from the horrible CGI at times, props not finished being painted, and some of the action scenes being a little clunky. The elites' armor designs were a little weird. They look like giant lizard gorillas, but I mean, it's what you get when you get live action Halo. Because unless you have like truly a Marvel-sized budget and people who are just going to go all in, it is going to look a little cheesy. And there's been multiple live action Halo kind of mini series, and they all kind of look like that. So honestly, coming out of it, there are a few things like the Covenant's plasma weapons, how they just eviscerate people. I thought that was absolutely insane, because obviously you never get to see that in the games. Even for like the original, all the Bungie Halos, essentially, the M rating was like a very light M rating. And then when 343 took over from like Halo 5 on, they pushed that teen rating. So really there was almost no gore at all. But that was something that as soon as the elite started firing on that like group of kids, and like body parts started flying off of them, I thought that was insane, and that was pretty cool, because you really don't get that. And when you have like futuristic, like the Covenant, like futuristic aliens having weapons, you're gonna have some pretty crazy weapons.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, again, just sidetracking on my part, where I'm not a Halo fan, so about half the words I understood of what you just said. So what kind of shocked me in this show, this is a Paramount Plus TV show that has a $90 million budget allocated for it.
Is it 90 or 9?
90. It is a $90 million budget, okay. And there's 9 episodes. So that means somewhere between the ballpark of, if you're averaging, it's about $10 million an episode. You mentioned the effects being bad at times. I'm going to take it even further. I'm going to say some of the effects are atrocious. And
oh yeah,
some of the effects are atrocious. That first fight scene where they come out, the aliens come out and they're fighting and they're on what seems to be something resembling Earth. When they're coming out, it looked really bad to me. My first instinct was to criticize it as almost looking like television, like straight up, just like when you see some of the bad shots from the CW for the Flash or Supergirl, that was my first instinct. It got better as the episode got out. Like it literally looked like cheap, and then slowly started you seeing the budget. And I think it changes once the actual Master Chief and all of them start coming out. Because the one thing they did really right in this first episode was the look of the world. Master Chief looks exactly like what you'd want him to look like in this. And I mean it he's the most faithful adaptation of this character's, at least look, that I think any fan could have been hoping for. And seeing it on live screen, that's a pretty cool feeling to get.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's people who will nitpick all day, and people will be like, oh, the armor looks plasticky, or I don't like the undersuit of the armor. It's, again, when you've got live costumes, obviously in our day and age, we don't have like superhumans that are built like Captain America, and you can't practically put a giant suit of titanium on them. So the props are always going to look a little plasticky, but like the really the look of the Spartans, all of the Spartans on Silver Team are really good. I really liked that.
And just to clarify, Silver Team is Master Chief and all his crew.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Silver Team is Master Chief and the 3 Spartans that you see throughout the episode.
That's
Actually,
what
it's the only 3 Spartans you see in the first episode.
Yeah.
Sorry, 4.
That kind of worked for me. So let me say my thoughts, like kind of on the overall episode. There are definitely a lot of strengths and weaknesses in it. My biggest criticism of this episode was I think there were too many characters introduced in one episode. There was just a lot going on. And I think as someone who was so new to this world, watching it, I just needed it to be like, okay, maybe we get introduced to Master Chief, that team. Maybe we get 1 or 2, and maybe we start getting to see the larger world of it. I need something a little bit more focused, because what ended up happening is when I'm watching it, it was almost overload, where I'm just like, there's a lot of characters on screen and I don't know exactly who any of them are, maybe not even to any faults of their own. It was just simply, I was just like, it was too much for me to handle for a first episode. With that said, I think the thing that they do really well in this episode is world building. They do establish the world of Halo really well in it. And that's just based on the different planets that we are seemingly on, the ships, all that. They give something really cool, and they set a foundation to this show that I was kind of shocked that they were able to do this quick. But it was enough for me to say, okay, even if I didn't like that aspect, they're doing something interesting with that aspect of the show. And that's where I was just like, okay, that's enough to keep me intrigued throughout the episode, even if I really only know who 2 or 3 of these characters are, and the rest are just like, are they main characters, or are they just like some random like general that doesn't have any importance? That's where I felt watching this episode.
Yeah, definitely. As someone, if you've played really any amount of the Halo games, and you've really paid attention to the story, basically everyone that they threw at you as far as characters go are in the game. So when you're looking at Commander Keyes and his daughter,
and Commander Keyes is the one who dies, correct?
No. Commander Keyes is the black guy who's talking to his daughter. That's he's part of the UNSC.
Oh yeah, okay.
The Insurrectionists, all those characters with the weird like mullets, but it's like buzzed on the side. All those characters are not like established characters in the games. I think the only characters that are going to be super important that aren't already in the games are that girl that Chief has in the Pelican that he just saved, and the lady who is dressed in all black who was talking to the aliens and was reading that human text, who is a human, but she's a part of the Covenant. That's not really in the games. Almost exclusively the Covenant, like, just absolutely just murder humans.
Yes.
They're kind of racist.
And I'm going to do this thing for 30 seconds, Ryan. I'm going to put a timer. Can you give us, and specifically me, a breakdown of exactly the plot of this episode in about 30 seconds? Just like, this is what happens, this person appears, blank, blank, this is where it ends. And I'm going to put the timer on you right now. Go.
All right, so we're first introduced to the Insurrectionists, which are basically a group of people who don't want to be a part of the UNSC. They get invaded by the Covenant. Spartans appear, Silver Team, Master Chief. Basically, the Covenant managed to kill all the Insurrectionists except for this one girl. I don't remember her name. But then Master Chief saves her. Master Chief finds this Forerunner object. They start heading back to the UNSC, and this Forerunner object's giving him memories of his past. And basically that causes him to kind of go AWOL.
Okay, you did it right. 31 seconds. Pretty impressive. Okay, that's a pretty good description of the episode because that's where I was following it as well. Let me ask you my next question that I have prepared, Ryan.
Yeah.
Is this show a faithful adaptation of the Halo game?
That's kind of a hard one, because it's using like the Halo IP, all the characters, but some of these characters aren't really faithful to how their character is lined up in the games. And like kind of like what I said going into this episode, I kind of expected it to just like the people who made this to like not even know what Halo was. And I kind of got a sense that they kind of knew, but really after finishing it, it seemed like they were trying to go for the Mandalorian, but reskinned with Halo.
Interesting. Okay.
So that whole scene where Master Chief takes off his helmet, in the games, we never see Master Chief's face.
That's where I was going to ask you next.
With the exception of like one legendary ending from Halo 4, you get like this much of Chief's face. And like that's kind of the charm of the Master Chief is it's kind of like the whole Spider-Man thing where he could be anybody and like he's supposed to embody you, the player. So literally anyone could be in that suit of armor. And as soon as you actually give Master Chief a face, he becomes a character that is no longer you, the player. He is you're no longer embodying Master Chief. He is now his own kind of defined thing. And I think they could have made a helmet face reveal work really well if it wasn't in the first episode, because they didn't really earn it. Kind of like in The Mandalorian, like obviously we all know what the actor's face looks like.
We know what Pedro Pascal is.
We all know what he looks like.
Schreiber's looks like as a human being.
Exactly. But in The Mandalorian, you get like, I forget, he doesn't take off his helmet in the first season, does he?
Yes, he does. He takes it off at the very end of season 1 when he's about to sacrifice himself.
Right.
In the battle against Moff Gideon. And you're right, though. It comes at the very last episode of season 1, and they build up to that.
So they build up this entire episode and making it like very intentional, like not to show his face, even when he's removing the helmet. And they do that all throughout the Halo games too, like in Combat Evolved. there's a very end credit scene where he takes off his helmet, but the camera just shifts enough so that there's a part of the ship that obscures his face. You can't see his face. I believe in the very beginning of Halo 2, you get a scene of him putting the helmet on, but you never actually like get to see his face in that. In Halo 4, you get the removal, which you only see a part of his eyes. So they tease you with all sorts of like, oh, what does he look like? But they never quite give it to you. And I think that could have worked really well in this show if they had saved that face reveal until the end, like the Mandalorian. Here it just kind of seems like it's kind of one of those things where almost like the Mandalorian, like you want to see his face, but the whole fun and charm of the character is not knowing what his face looks like. So when you remove it in the first episode, it kind of takes away the fun. Now everyone knows what he looks like, and now it's not like this huge secret who Master Chief is.
I agree with you. I found that reveal weird. Not weird in the sense of like it didn't like make sense in the story they were telling. Weird in the fact that it felt like they were teasing this idea of who is this guy, and then he takes it off and it's somebody who looks like Pablo Schreiber.
Yeah,
and
it's
just
almost
like,
immediately it's like instant gratification. Like you're, oh, what does he look like? And then it's just boop.
They don't allow you to like live with that, or just why they build up that mythos of Master Chief and why he wears this helmet. And two, when it just sometimes my issue is when you take off the character's mask, you demystify them. And I talked about that when I was talking about the Book of Boba Fett. I found that demystified Boba in a lot of ways. Doing this, it took it from a sci-fi world to something that felt really grounded, like on Earth. And it's just like, it lost some of that sci-fi charm to me. Now, that's not to say that they can't be doing something really cool with the Master Chief character, with him being more out of the suit. That's not to, again, criticize it. I don't have any attachment to this game. I don't really care. I just thought it was a weird thing to deliberately make that choice in the first episode and make people wonder, like, who is this guy? And then pay it off by the end of the first episode. That already gets me a little concerned about pacing with this show, where I'm just like, are they kind of just throwing everything at the kitchen sink and seeing what sticks? That's where I get a little worried with it. Here's what I will say. I don't know much of Pablo Schreiber's work. I thought he was a pretty good Master Chief. Like,
yeah, neither do I. I thought he nailed it.
Yeah, in terms of voice, I would be kind of shocked if people had a pretty negative opinion. I think he gives a good performance. Paramount Plus is doing this interesting thing right now where they seem to be trying to carve out themselves as a streaming service, but they seem to be doing it towards a very niche audience. They are making it Halo, and they're making the Star Trek properties. Like, they are clearly going for maybe that sci-fi gap that maybe some of the other streaming services have, getting those types of shows. And that's actually a pretty good idea. I actually think they can make a pretty big names for themselves if they're like, we are the company making Star Trek. We are the company making Halo. We're doing other Microsoft projects, whatever it may be. I'm sure they have more that I'm just not familiar with coming out. Maybe they acquire other shows soon where it's just like, okay, these are the guys for this type of content. But it is interesting that they went with this. My next question for you, and this is probably where we can kind of wrap it up, because again, not much happens in this episode despite the runtime. I was a little annoyed it's an hour. It felt a little over long. I'm like, there's going to be 9 of these episodes, and are they each going to be an hour? I think probably a little bit shorter, because there were just scenes where it was, and again, it's the idea of like, there's too many people on screen where it's just like, okay, I'm following this character, Master Chief. I'm following this girl. I'm following her dad, maybe one of the other guys. Like, I kind of can follow that. The other ones, it's just like, okay, I'm learning about this new military like operation, but I'm not getting enough time to spend with it. My next question is, and my last one, does this pilot episode get you excited for the rest of the season?
Sorta. I'm kind of going into this show reserved
Oh.
because this is a franchise I really like, and the first episode didn't exactly knock it out of the park. It was more just like okay, that wasn't terrible.
Mhm.
Like I had my expectations low, and it was gently above that, but not enough for me to be like, you know what, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't say I'm like itching for Wednesday nights
True.
when Halo comes out. I would say I'm more excited for Moon Knight.
Which I was going to ask you about that. They're both releasing Wednesday nights.
Yes.
Terrible strategy.
Yep.
Or that is probably Disney kind of just screwing their competition and purposely releasing it on a Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm honestly more excited for Moon Knight because I have no expectations for it, but like I'm not overly familiar with the Moon Knight character, and all they've done is build this character up, and I'm loving what I'm seeing so far. As far as what the Halo TV show has shown and delivered, like I'm at the point where even if I sat down and watched the Halo show for an hour, I would almost just like, if you're going to take over the course of 9 weeks and you're just going to spend 1 hour devoted to anything Halo, I would more recommend just playing the games, because the games are fantastic. With maybe the exception of Halo 5, but you know, whatever. But I would almost recommend that. Like if someone is like, you know what, I'm going to take an hour out of my week every week for the next 9 weeks to immerse myself in Halo, I'd say just spend an hour playing the Master Chief Collection, playing through all the campaigns, Combat Evolved 2, 3, Reach, ODST, 4. Like I would just spend that hour in the Master Chief Collection just playing campaign, honestly, at this point.
Yeah. I'm at the weird point as well where, as someone who has enough interest in this show, I'm in the same boat where it's just like, can I recommend this episode? I don't think I really can just yet, but I can give it a tepid reservation. Like if someone was to ask me, do you think this show could be good? I think my answer is right now, yes. I think there's enough in there where I am more positive than negative. If I had to do my 1 out of 4 stars review of it, it's probably right now sitting on a 2.5 positive, not a 2.5 negative. So it's a mixed review for me, but it's a positive mixed review for me, where I'm leaning more positive than I am negative. And I think they have enough in this show working in its advantage that I'm curious to see where they go on. I think I like the design of Master Chief. I like the world they're building, and I'm kind of a sucker at anything sci-fi. And I actually thought the action was handled very well in this episode, even though it's pretty sparse. I think
it also was a little clunky, but that also is what you get when you have actual people in alien costumes. Like the aliens don't move like the aliens move in the games, but like you can't have a guy on stilts doing all these crazy roles like the elites do. So to me it seemed a little clunky, but that's just what happens when you do practical stunts of non-human aliens.
Yeah, and there's a way to do it less clunky, because I agree there's a little bit of clunkiness to it. There is a way, and that sometimes comes into the fact of direction. Are these guys good directors? I can't tell you. What I will say, in fairness, it's a pilot episode, and it's hard to judge pilots because we don't know exactly where they're going. Right now, I'm not in, but I'm interested. That's where my review is kind of where it's just like, you've given me enough to show me that you are competent. And right now, competent was kind of all I needed for this pilot episode to be, to move forward and say, episode 2 has some interest. And I think what I want to see next week in an episode 2 is I want something more singularly focused on the characters. I want it to be with like Master Chief and the girl, and maybe like the team down on the ground. I think if we get something where it's a little bit more focused, I need now a little bit character driven, because I'm like, we're supposed to believe Master Chief makes this big decision by the end. I'm just like, I don't know this character enough that like this decision doesn't have any real payoff that he makes, because it's just like, is that like a thing in his character? Is that just like who he is? Or is this like him doing this is like a big deal and we need to understand that? That's where I need to see it next week. I kind of need to see him grappling with what he decided to do in episode 1. So that's kind of my hope going into this week's episode for Halo episode 2. But overall, my review, 2.5 out of 4 stars. It hits enough positive for me that I was interested and I was left entertained, even if I don't think it comes out of the door swinging, and it still needs to justify its existence for me.
Yeah. I think I'm sitting almost exactly like using your 4-point scale. I think that 2.5 is a good spot. And I would fully agree with both 2.5 positive, 2.5 negative. If you're using 2 separate scales for this, right? Obviously that both of those anyway, but I honestly, like, if this show wasn't Halo, I don't know if it would have grabbed my attention like it did, and I don't know if I would continue to watch it if it wasn't.
Which, in fairness, I remember you said the same review of another show when we both started watching it. And we both said the same thing about The Mandalorian at the very beginning of season 1. If this wasn't Star Wars, would we be watching it? And the answer at the beginning was probably not, but I like Star Wars enough that I'm sold into this. Now, true, I think the pilot of Mandalorian is better crafted.
Oh, yeah.
But
I'll agree that while I have the same kind of thought process on both shows, I definitely, like, if you had taken Star Wars and Halo away from those pilot episodes, I still would have enjoyed The Mandalorian more.
I agree. But I think the similarities are there, and I agree they're probably on purpose. It feels like Paramount might be getting some influence from how they are taking the direction of The Mandalorian and Star Wars TV. But anyway, guys, that is our review of episode 1 of the Halo TV show, Contact. Join us again next week as we dive into episode 2. So thank you guys for listening. I'm Ben.
I'm Ryan.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.